is what I always. Spectacular. Well, we welcome our speaker today, Dr. Rebecca Heiss. She is dedicated to helping us to overcome our evolutionary limitations, the ancient fears that hold us back, fears that we're often not even consciously aware that we have. Her research has been designated transformative by the National Science Foundation and is waking up audiences around the world. Dr. Heiss confronts these fears daily in her own work and applies her research to solve the practical problems of overcoming unconscious behaviors that haunt human life. She is the founder / CEO of the Self-Awareness 360 Leadership Review app called iQity, which helps every individual reach his or her full potential. She is also the author of the acclaimed new book, Instinct: Rewire Your Brain with Science-Backed Solutions to Increase Productivity and Achieve Success. I'm admitting somebody as we go. There we go. She has been honored to speak internationally on her work, including multiple TED Talks, and has found her calling in helping others recognize the power of unconscious biological limitations in their lives. She's a full-time speaker and facilitator of Fearless Accelerator Program, which leads high-achieving women through stress, fear of failure, and imposter syndrome to a place of confident and authentic leadership. Rebecca lives in South Carolina with her spoiled rotten dogs named Guinness and Murphy, who I had the pleasure to meet. And every day she tries to live her life motto, spread happy. As is our custom, I'd like you to introduce yourself with your name, your business, one sentence about what your company does, and answer this question. It's an easy one, totally easy. Ready? What do you fear? I will start off. Francine Lasky, Chair of Vistage and Francine Lasky Enterprises. I lead Vistage groups. What do I fear? I fear not being enough. That's a lot of therapy, people. That was a lot of therapy that went through that. Pat, go ahead. You go next.
Pat Benuso, president of TMG. We are e-commerce consulting and implementation firm. And what do I fear is not being there for my kids as they grow up. I will pass it to John.
John, how about you?
Okay, John Medio, president of Rockphone North America. We produce, manufacture, and sell acoustical ceilings. So drop ceilings, tiles, and suspension grid. And I fear popped up questions like this that I can't answer.
That's fair.
Yeah, I don't know. I would say failure, but failure is not the right word. That's way too generic. But really, really working at something and still not being able to solve it, if that's the best explanation.
Got it. How about you, Gary?
All right, I'm Gary Rose. I'm COO and president of Clear Height Properties. We're a commercial real estate company that owns and operates industrial and office buildings around the Midwest. And what do I fear? I would say not being able to provide for my family in a way that, you know, they can live life meaningfully. If I'm picking someone, I guess I'll go to RJ.
All right, thanks, Gary. RJ McMahon. I'm the CEO of Oak Lydon Developmental Services, and we serve individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Group homes, day programs for adults, and then early intervention programs for children birth to 3. And I fear, I guess I fear not being prepared.
All right, Barry, how about you?
Barry, you're muted, man. Polite. Hi, try that again. My name is Barry Consul. I'm an architect and I'm a partner with Jensen and Halstead, and we're a healthcare architectural and interior design firm in Chicago that specializes in care and senior living and a little bit of higher education. And I think I fear not meeting people's expectations and letting people down.
Awesome. Thanks, Barry. Nikisha, nothing like a small question to open up your Vistage.
All right, a heavy one, right? Okay, so I am Nikisha. I am CEO and co-founder of It Takes a Village family of schools. We provide high quality, culturally responsive educational services to children from infancy through 8th grade, as well as wraparound social services. I guess the very first thing that came to mind when asked the question, what do I fear? The response was rejection, but I think it's more not being heard or not being included in conversations.
Awesome. Thank you. How about you, Andy Wells?
Andy Wells, Normandy Remodeling in Chicago area. We add on to homes, remodel kitchens, bathrooms, whole home remodeling. I think what I fear right now more than anything is stepping up to challenges that appear to be out of my control. And I know I've got to do stuff, but it's been very challenging.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy. Andy Hurd.
Hey, Andy Hurd. I'm a president of a real estate development company, kind of focused on multifamily hospitality, mixed use kind of developments and I'm in Central Texas. I'm in Austin, so I'm the only Southerner of this group here. What do I fear? I think it's the fear of failure, but in the sense of letting myself down, with trying something and not being good at it competitively, going into something and expecting a lot and not hitting my expectations. It's somewhat can be limiting. And so that's probably one of my fears.
Excellent. Thanks, Andy. Gwen, how about you?
I'm Gwen Harris. I'm sorry, I have a little cold. I'm the co-founder and CPO of It Takes a Village. Nikisha has already stated what we do. I fear making the wrong decision. So there's always a decision to make. And I really want to make the right decisions. So sometimes I'm indecisive because I want to make the right decision.
Excellent. Excellent. All right, Rebecca, I'll turn it over to you.
Wow, thank you. First of all, thank you for starting off the morning with such vulnerability. That is not an easy question to answer in front of a complete stranger. And that kind of sets up the whole morning, because this morning I am going to challenge you. So my ask is just take a deep breath. I don't know you personally, so I don't know you well enough to be coming after you, Andy, or you, Gary, RJ, Nikisha. I don't know you individually. So please take a deep breath and no, I'm not coming after you, but feel free to challenge me back. All right. I'm here to be challenged as much as I'm here to challenge. So interrupt me, ask questions as we go. I know it can be a little awkward with Zoom because, often we're on mute. Hello. There we go. And you feel maybe like you missed the opportunity or I moved on. No. Just interrupt me. This is how, we'll get through this. Otherwise, I'll get into lecture mode and it's going to be really boring for you. All right. So it's a lot better if we play all in.
I would like to ask, Rebecca, if you don't mind, you can stay off mute unless you have a dog or child or other things. It just makes it easier than wasting a lot of time saying, Gary, you're on mute. Barry, you're on mute, whatever it is. So stay off mute, put it on when you need to, take care of whatever that background noise is, but otherwise stay off mute. And that's a better one. We have one more guest that's coming in. So
awesome.
I'm going to let her in right now.
Awesome.
And
thanks.
let me ask you guys too, I have a little heater here in my office because it's cold, so it's blowing. You all don't hear it, right? It's not like, okay, all right.
I have the same heater, so they're hearing mine, not yours.
Yep, no worries. The other thing I'll say is I will provide you with this full slide deck. So don't feel like you have to write everything down that I say. That's just for my ego. I promise you it's big enough as it is. So I will make sure that you have this full slide deck and we will jump right in. So Francine gave me a lovely introduction. I want to give you a slightly different introduction about who I am. That is me. And I am judging the group right now because you guys are all very kind. You're not laughing. I wish you were. It's okay to laugh. That's me. It's a little bit of a ridiculous photograph of me, but it happens to be my favorite photograph ever taken. And here's why. I'm 8 years old and I know exactly who I am and what I want to be when I grow up. And no, it's not a farmer. I loved the theater. I wanted to find every spotlight I could and just kind of get in it. There was just one small problem with that. See, I grew up in a really small town in upstate New York, so not a whole lot of theater opportunities to be had. So I did the next best thing and I joined my local 4-H club, because in 4-H, you can enter public speaking competitions. So I did. I entered my citywide competition and you guys, I won. Thank you. Thank you. I was the only competitor. So, you know, not a huge deal, but it meant that I got to go on to county, and county was a big deal because there were actual competitors there. So I was nervous, and imagine my surprise when the judges call my name, first place. And I'm like, yeah, all right, I got this clear trajectory about where I'm going in life. But first, I got to get through states. Now, states as an 8-year-old, man, state competition, that's for real, because now it's not just me and my family that knows, it's my teachers, it's my friends. It feels like the entire community knows about this thing, this competition that I'm entering, and I am terrified because I do not want to let them down. So I'm practicing and I'm practicing, and finally the day of states rolls around, and what happens?
You freeze?
Oh, I wish.
Nope, you rocked it.
Ah, I love you guys. No, I did not rock it. I did not win. I definitely did not lose. I never showed up.
Oh,
I know. The day of the competition, I played sick because it was simply safer to not go all in, to have that little excuse of like, well, but you know, like if I had gone in, I'd have been all right. Where are you playing sick in your own life right now? Where are you not going all in because you're allowing that little piece of fear to hold you back from making that next decision, from going all into your business, to your relationship, to whatever that thing is? Because we all know that life is meant to be lived, to be full on experience. And most of us are just kind of surviving through it. Most of us die sometime when we're 18 and we forget to be buried until much later in life. And that's not our fault necessarily. It's actually the fault of our lousy brains. So here's the big problem. The big problem that all of us have is that our brains aren't built for this world. They're built for this one. It's a world where our ancestors lived. And for 200,000 plus years, we lived in this dangerous, sparse, scary environment where there were literal tigers around every corner. Now, you look around today, I'm coming to you from a hotel room in Chicago in this beautiful facility where it's warm and everything's pleasant, and we have this incredible increase in technology. So the last 200 years, we've had this exponential increase in safety and technology and populations. Small problem being, biology doesn't operate on an exponential scale. It's really slow. So biologically, our brains are stuck back here, looking for the metaphorical tiger around every corner. We operate mainly from fear. Here's the biggest problem with having a Stone Age brain in the modern environment. Information is coming at us really fast in this modern world, right? At a rate of about 400 billion bits per second. We're processing a crazy amount of info. The trouble is our frontal lobe, this conscious cognitive portion where we want to be processing from, is slow. It can only process about 2,000 bits per second. So what that means, if you want to do the math with me this morning, is that about 99.999999999% of the time, we're operating from these shortcuts, from these stories, from these instincts of our subconscious that kept us alive for 200,000 plus years, but today are preventing us from fully living. So we need to begin updating this conscious brain of ours for the modern world in which we live. So here's the big issue. We started the whole day talking about what your biggest fear is. And this survey was actually done globally about 5 years ago, asking people what their number one fear was. What do you think the number one fear of people is?
Rejection.
Failure.
Rejection is high on the list. Failure, high on the list. Two of the biggest fears, not number one.
Dying.
Dying, you would think. Nope, it's actually beneath both of rejection and failure.
Public speaking.
Public speaking is also way above death. So this is not super logical, right? The old Jerry Seinfeld joke is it's better to be
Yep.
in the casket than having to give the eulogy, right? Because we so fear public speaking. It's like setting you up for failure and rejection. Other thoughts?
Running out of money.
Running out of money. Didn't even make the top 10. Great guess though. Not bad, guys. You gave me a great conscious cognitive list. I appreciate that. Are you
Being
ready?
embarrassed?
Getting embarrassed. Great guess. It kind of goes with rejection, but not number one.
Future.
What? The future. Ooh, good guess. Not even in the top 10. Here's what the number one fear is. Are you ready?
Mhm.
It's snakes.
What?
I know, right? This is absurd. You're looking at me like, come on. There's so many other. You're not walking through the Costco parking lot like, ooh, there's snakes here. I gotta look out for those snakes. That's absurd. But it does begin to make a little more sense when we remember, oh yeah, Stone Age brain. And for our ancestors, that was a real threat. So to this day, despite the fact that most of us aren't threatened by snakes every day, our brain is still going, oh my God, snake, 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 it's a snake, we gotta look out. Now, if we are conscious, cognitive, thinking beings, which I like to think we all are, you guys gave me some great responses. I'm gonna add one more thing to the list that I didn't hear that I personally believe should be our number one fear. Are you ready for it? Try not to scream. No screams of terror here? What's going on? What's the number one thing we die of, people? Number one killer is
Heart
Heart
disease.
disease.
heart
Heart attack.
disease. That should look like the laser beam of an AK-47 pointed directly at your heart. But if you're anything like me, you're looking at it going, I don't know, breakfast was delicious. What's for lunch? Francine, are we ordering something in? Because can we make sure it comes with fries? Why does our brain crave things that kill us? Oh yeah, ancestral brain, right? And in the ancestral environment, we couldn't get enough fats and sugars to survive. We had to layer it down so we could survive this cold, harsh winter we're having. Our brains haven't caught up to the fact that, of course, we could pick up the phone and have 5,000 calories delivered to us within 5 minutes for $5. Small detail. If our brains were built for this world, kale, you know, that like decorative stuff, that would taste more like this. And I don't know if you've tried it recently, but it definitely doesn't. So here's the big problem. The biggest problem is we're bringing these Stone Age brains with us every day to work. So I want you to imagine that you're back in ancestral times. Maybe it's your job to pick berries. So you're out picking the berries. It's a lovely day, right? Just picking those berries away. And you hear or you see a little rustling behind you. What should you immediately do?
Turn around.
Turn around.
I mean, at least, right? You better at least check it out. If not, immediately get out of Dodge. But you got to take some action there, right? Thank goodness in today's modern environment, we of course don't have any pings or dings or vibrations or things that, but right. And our brain is literally going, snake, that ping, that ding, that thing, it's a tiger. Oh my gosh, you got to answer that email immediately. It's going to kill you. No, it's not. It's Kathy. We like Kathy, but our brains don't know that. So our brains fall first to fear. It's the same reason when your kid's school calls you, or you get called in by your boss or by your board, and you're not expecting it. The first thought that runs through your head is probably not, oh, I'm getting an award today. Oh my God, what did I do? What did my kid do? What's going on? There's something. We're falling first to fear. Unfortunately, our brain doesn't rise to the level of our expectations of our biggest, highest consciousness. We fall to the level of our training. And our training is all based in this fear reactionary response. So as long as we're down, I'm going to kick you because I don't actually think that we're really human. Humans have this incredible gift, this frontal lobe, this expanded frontal lobe where we make conscious cognitive decisions from. We don't do that. We're a little more like zombies. So hear me out. When you put your hand on a hot stove, what do you do?
Off.
Yeah, pull it off. Why?
It hurts.
Thank you. But that's actually not the reason we do that. Here's the crazy thing. You remove your hand before your brain registers heat or pain. Now that's great. That's a good instinct to have in this case. What ends up happening though is that our brain catches up and then we justify and we say, I moved my hand because it was hot and it hurt. Well, no, but ultimately, that's how your brain justifies your behavior. Now, in this case, that's a good thing. You want to move your hand. It helps you from burning your hand. But it does beg the question, how many other behaviors do we first enact? And then our brain catches up and we justify. And the answer is, only like 99.99999% of the time are we doing that. It's probably fine. Don't worry about it. Our brains need some updating. So we're not just processing with the press secretary up here. We're actually operating from a real CEO position. So here are the 3 big fears that we're covering today. The 3 biggest fears are snakes and people. I put them in the same category because our brain treats them the same way. People and snakes are predators. At least they were for our ancestors. We died about 60% of the time from predators, other tribes, snakes, tigers, lions, bears. We treated them the same. The second fear you guys got immediately, rejection. It's terrifying. Who loves to be rejected? Nobody in sales, I see. Nobody likes rejection, even though salespeople don't like rejection. So why is rejection so terrifying? Well, again, for our brains, if you got kicked out of the tribe back in the day, you died, right? You couldn't make it out there alone. And so our brain still believes a little bit of rejection. If we don't please everybody around us, oh my gosh, it's a death sentence. Not really. We need some updating there. Same thing with failure. We fail to bring home enough meat to survive, or we fail to impress that person that we want to have babies with. Oh my gosh, you might as well be dead. Biologically, it's a death sentence. And our brain still treats it that way. Again, today we fail. Typically, a failure doesn't mean instant death. It means we get to learn something and then process and engage and move forward. So our brains need a little updating there as well. Let's start with the first one, people. Now, people is my favorite one, but it's also one of the more challenging ones for people because none of us like to think that we're threatened by other people. I think it's only fair as we dive into talking about other people that I give you a little more background on me. So I grew up in what many people would describe as a fairly non-traditional household. Several of my siblings are Black, and my youngest brother, Johnny, happens to be Black. I'm walking him home from baseball practice one day, and I'm 20 something. And what you can't tell over Zoom is I am not a small woman. I stand about 6 foot with flats on. And Johnny at this time comes up to about here on me. He's 8. And a cop car pulls up alongside of us. Cop unrolls his window and the cop looks like me. He leans out and he kind of looks at me and says, "Ma'am, you okay?" Yeah, I'm good. Should you not be concerned with this little boy who doesn't look like he belongs with me that I'm dragging along right now? And it got me wondering. Now, I'm not blaming the cop, don't hear that. But it got me wondering, why is it that we so fear the other? Anyone who doesn't look like us, act like us, operate under the same rules and regulations as us. And it took me my first master's degree to figure this out. It's taking you guys a solid 5 minutes. You know the answer. What kind of brain do we have?
Stone Age brain.
Thank you. A Stone Age brain. And who did we hang out with back in the Stone Age? People that looked like us, that acted like us, that operated under the same rules and regulations as us, that thought like us. And anybody who didn't, they weren't coming over to borrow a cup of sugar. They were going to steal all of our resources. They were going to kill us. This was a major threatening. Well, today, of course, that's not the case. We know that, and we know all the research, right? We've seen this research again and again and again. Diverse teams are more creative. They're more engaged. They come out with more accurate solutions to problems. They create more profitable companies. We get this. So why is it that diversity initiatives continue to fail? Well, there's any number of reasons. I'm going to address one that I think gets overlooked a lot. And it's this one right here. It's that well-meaning people neglect the fact that their brains are still having stress responses to anybody who looks different, acts different, sounds different. Right now, if you're anything like me, you're like, yeah, okay, but I don't do that. Good. But a stranger walks through the door right now who does not look like you. Each and every one of us will experience a stress response. Now, you may not even feel it, but what ends up happening is your body instantly releases cortisol. It's a protective mechanism. Cortisol is your main stress hormone. And the number one thing it does is it shuts down this frontal lobe where you're making conscious cognitive decisions from, which means you become more reliant on that reactionary portion of your brain that says, whoa, dangerous, scary, disease-ridden, other, we can't trust them. Wait a second. Again, not how any of us consciously think, right? Can we play a little game? Are you guys up for this?
Sure.
Is everybody a little bit nervous about this already? It's okay. I'm not here. In fact, I'm in this.
Rebecca, you're a scary person.
I know. I know. People do think that. I promise I'm not as scary as I look at 6 foot. All right. So here's the game. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to picture the first image that comes to mind when I say picture a felon. First image that comes to mind. Be honest. Did he look like this? Did any of you picture Martha Stewart?
No.
Okay. Here's the thing. Really importantly, this does not make you a bad person. I want to say it again. This doesn't make us bad people. This makes us reliant on shortcuts. And here's the problem with shortcuts. Our brain relies on them. With 400 billion bits of information coming at us every single second, our brain creates shortcuts so that it can process the information in the world. So here's the issue. Ready? Celebrity, white, female, felon. They're not anywhere close to one another in the brain. And this becomes really problematic, especially in business, because again, I'm going to give you another challenge. Are you ready? Picture a CEO. First image that comes to mind is
White male.
It's got to be Bezos or somebody who looks like him, right? Now, again, this doesn't make us bad people when we don't picture Ursula Burns or any person of color, any female. Again, doesn't make you a bad human, makes us reliant on shortcuts and makes us human. The big issue, again, is not that we don't think this immediately, it's that often these stories impact us more than we recognize. So I want to tell you another story about how I grew up. I grew up like many of you. I promise we get to Disney. Those of you that were on the call earlier. I grew up on Disney. You guys grew up on Disney? Yeah. So personally, I learned from a very young age that powerful women are
evil.
Evil.
Now, why would you say that? I mean, of course, that's exactly the story that's being told here. Now, I don't think Disney executives sat down and they're like, ooh, you know what we're going to do? We're going to make all older women terrible human beings. I don't think that was an intentional conscious choice. I think there's a biological shortcut there. See, ancestrally, females, what are we valued for?
Reproduction.
There it is. And we age past that value, don't we? So if we've aged past that value, as these lovely ladies have, and we still have power, oh my gosh, well, we must have come about it in some evil, witchy way. That doesn't happen naturally. And gentlemen, I'm not trying to leave you out of this equation. You're not even a part of a Disney movie unless you're a what?
Hero.
A prince, a hero. You better be a prince because I'm not looking at you. Otherwise, you got to have status and power and money, baby. That's what we value you for. Now, wait a second. These stories, they don't impact us anymore. They don't impact us in the real world, do they? Well, this is one of my favorite stats because I told you I'm 6 foot, right? So across the US population as a whole, gentlemen, only 14.5% of you are over 6 foot. Personally, I think that number is exaggerated, but I'm going to give it to you. All right, 14.5%.
The 6
Now-
foot or the 14% is exaggerated.
Yes, you're spot on there, sir.
All right.
John. Yeah. So here's the issue, 14.5%. Okay. However, if you look among Fortune 500 CEOs, that number goes from 14.5% to 58%.
Wow.
So, I mean, what's going on here, right? One of two things. Either tall people inherently make better leaders, which, you know, I like to think is the case, but I don't think is actually true. Alternatively, we're still putting people into positions of power for the wrong reasons and keeping others out for the wrong reasons. You guys are hiring, right? Anybody not hiring right now? Cool. Let's have a little hiring call. Now I'm going to be your perfect candidate. Are you ready? Hi, my name is Rebecca Heiss. I have a doctorate. What is it you're looking for? I'm an amazing candidate. Everything is perfect. Are you going to hire me? Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't even matter if I'm not interacting with customers on a daily basis. You're not hiring me. Why? A shortcut. Why are higher voices so annoying? Why do we trust, fun one, lower voices more? In fact, trained politicians, if you listen carefully, I'm not going to bring up politics too much today, but if you listen carefully, you can find out when people are lying because they lower their register. Why? Because we trust inherently lower voices more. Higher testosterone must be more dominance. Well, that's an old, ridiculous story, and yet it still impacts us today. It's also the same reason that you'll see people wearing lifts behind platforms so they can be taller and more dominant, and we vote them in. Now, look, culturally, we've gotten better at some things, right? We've got Wonder Woman now. Guys, Wonder Woman. You guys are an example.
Well, that's old. I don't know that I'd call that recent.
Okay, fair enough. Well, here's the thing. I'm not trying to diminish anybody's attempts here, but I gotta be honest with you. Last time I went to war, I did not remove clothing and take down my hair first. See, I think we're still telling these same stories. Of course she's powerful. Look at her. She's young and beautiful. We're still valuing her for the same things. I'm waiting for the 65-year-old Wonder Woman married to the 5'2" stay-at-home dad, because you guys know you're the butt of every sitcom joke, right? Like, you can't cook a meal or change a baby's diaper. That's absurd. We're still telling these same stories, and they impact us so much more than we recognize. So I'm going to do one more test before I move on here. But this is my favorite one. And probably it's because I'm not blonde. But you guys know the stereotype, right? I'm not saying it's true, but you know the stereotype, yeah?
Yes.
Dom and Betsy? Okay. Not saying it's true. So I need you to give me a list of stereotypical blondes, not people you work with. I did this a couple of weeks ago and somebody was like, Janet! It's like, oh my God, no. Let's stick to celebrity examples. As many as you can come up with. Let's go. Who do you have?
Paris Hilton.
Heck yes. Keep them coming.
Well, very importantly, Farrah Fawcett, but that was a while ago.
That's all right.
She was very important to a lot of us.
Yeah, I hear you.
Reese Witherspoon.
Reese Witherspoon.
How about the one from Baywatch? What was her?
Pamela Anderson.
Pamela Anderson.
Thank you.
What else you guys got?
Barbie. There you go.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I've asked this question to hundreds of thousands of people, no exaggeration, and I've gotten the same answers every time. There are a handful of people that have come up with this response. Anybody want to last submissions here? You could be one of the handful.
Ah.
or any male for that matter. Matthew McConaughey, are you kidding me? All right, all right, all right. Here's the thing. I don't think we're biased against blondes. I think we're biased against women. And guys, I'm not picking on you. Females, we give the same responses. And I could flip this and I could ask about dumb jocks. I don't make the list, independent of my IQ or my athletic ability. The challenge here is recognizing that your brain has associations that you're completely unaware of. Like, in order to be a dumb blonde, you also have to be
a woman.
And in order to be a dumb jock, you also have to be
a man.
And there's so many of these subconscious associations that we're completely unaware of. And the scariest thing about these is you don't even have to believe in the stereotype in order to act from within them. So I'm going to show you something. I'm going to lower my register so you believe me. This square A and this square B are the same color. And you're looking at me like, you're insane. That's not true. And now I'm going to show you and you'll realize, oh yes, I was telling the truth. You can see now that this gray is the same as this gray. Yes? Thumbs up? Okay. All right, so we can see and we know consciously that these are the same color. The same way we know, we don't have to fear people who think different, look different, act. We know that. We know that men, you're perfectly capable in the home. Women, we're perfectly capable as leaders. We know that. Hold on to those truths. Hold on to it. Hold on to it. Oh, what happened? Well, it's okay. I'll give it to you again. We know the truth. We know you don't have to be over 6 foot to run a successful tech company. We know that. We know blondes aren't, we know that. Hold on to that truth. Hold on to it. Hold on to it. What's going on? What's happening is your subconscious mind is overriding what you consciously know. So this little yellow cylinder here was a 3-dimensional object that casts a shadow. And for 200,000 years, if B was in a shadow here, well, obviously it was lighter. And so your brain is doing this calculus to show you the truth. And we very easily see the truth. The problem, of course, is that there's new truths and the environment has shifted greatly. So we need some tools. We need some ways to see the world as it actually is. And if you're slow enough and you're conscious enough of the fact that you might have a bias around this, you can kind of hold your hand up and tilt your head and squint your eyes and you can see the truth still. But how often are we making decisions like that? How often are we saying, wait, slow down, slow down. I need to just kind of back up and look at it from a couple different angles. Realistically, typically, how are you making decisions? Quickly. Probably under stress. Yeah. So as a stress physiologist, what I would do is I would typically bring you into my lab and I'd stress you out so I could understand how you make decisions. Now, if we were in person today, I would have brought my little foot shockers, which is really fun for me. So we hook people up to foot shockers and then randomly shock you, which is a pretty stressful thing. Don't worry, TSA does not allow me to travel with these things. So I had to find out a new way to stress people out. And it turns out there's a really good way to do it. And it works better than foot shockers. Are you ready for it? Doing math out loud together. Now you guys are getting nervous, right? I can see it on your faces.
Okay. Love math.
You love math. Fantastic. We got you then. All right. So here's what's about to happen. What's about to happen is I'm about to put you into a stressed out state by doing rapid successions of math. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to give you a 3, 2, 1 countdown, and everybody is unmuted at this point is going to shout out the answer to that first question. As soon as you do, the next question pops up. There are 7 questions total. Go as rapidly as you can. Do not wait for the group. Do not wait for that rhythm. Just go, 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 go. At the end of the sequence, there's going to be a question that pops up at the bottom of the screen here that is not math related. And I'm going to shout it at you rather aggressively. Wherever you are in the math sequence, I want you to answer that question out loud. Now you're nervous. Don't worry, this is not about race or gender. It's not entrapment. Don't worry. You're not going to get in trouble for your answer, okay? But I do want you to shout it out loud. Everybody in?
Yes.
Everybody's already nervous? Cool. All right, you should be unmuted at this point. Ready? 3, 2, 1.
28,
86,
44, 84, 42.
Even call it a tool, call it a tool, call it a tool, call it a tool.
Hammer.
Call it a
Blue
tool,
and hammer.
call it a tool.
Red hammer.
red hammer.
Why did I say blue hammer?
I
Along
said
with everybody
yellow.
else.
Of you, raise your hands. How many of you said red or blue? Hands up, red or blue? Red or blue hammer?
Red.
Hey,
Both.
how am I that good? What? Did anybody get anything other than that?
Green hammer.
Oh, you still got hammer.
Yellow.
Yellow. That's okay. Did you get hammer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yellow hammer.
Anybody have anything completely off the radar? Woo! By the way, I'm not that good. You can do this to anybody. All I did was put you into a stressed out state, in which case you narrow your options. And we go immediately to the category. We're like, what's the first tool you ever used? A hammer. Probably one of those Fisher-Price ones, you know, the red and blue ones. And so our brain goes, that's the one, the hammer. And we never get lavender washing machine. It's a perfectly good color. It's a great tool. Nobody comes up with it. Now, here's the thing. That's fine if we're talking about colors and tools. It's problematic when we apply the same kind of thinking to people, which we do all the time. So I got really interested in understanding what my associations were, what my first reaction, that first initial like, ooh, the hammer, was when I saw people of color, when I saw men, when I saw somebody from a different religion. What was my association? And in order to do this, I did a lot of research with the IAT, the Implicit Associations. Has anybody heard of it before? Taken an IAT before? Implicit Associations Test? Cool. Here's how it works. The way the IAT works is this. It measures the minuscule differences in time that it takes our brain to process information that's related. So tool and hammer, really quick, versus information that's unrelated. Tool and beach. We can get there, but it takes our brains a second longer to process. Now, we're not interested in measuring tool and hammer or tool and beach. We said, well, what if we have male faces and female faces and words related to leadership and words related to family? How quickly can we relate the family words to the male faces and to the female faces, and the leadership words to the male faces and to the female faces? And I gave this test to 700 powerful female CEOs. And the results, over 90% of those women CEOs were biased against themselves as leaders. Oh, this isn't a white male problem. I mean, it is. And it's a Black female problem. And it's a Hispanic non-gender binary problem. And it's a human problem.
Rebecca, I do have a question.
Yeah,
Is
please.
this because earlier you were saying, I mean, I'm thinking about the fact that our brain has created these shortcuts, but I'm also thinking about the fact that our environment helped our brain to create these shortcuts. So I guess I'm pushing back on how much of this is just innate humanness based on the way our brain is programmed versus our environment and what we have been bombarded with in our broader society.
Nikisha, it's a great question. And the answer is yes, and it's both. So one of the easiest ways to see this is when we look at the Black community and we ask them to categorize words like felon, scary, dangerous, other, with beautiful, smart, successful. And we pair them with white and Black faces. And we see about a 50-50 split. So what ends up happening is about 50% of Black people are saying, this is my tribe, these are my people. Of course, they're beautiful and they're smart and they're intelligent, they're right. And they're just as fast as pairing Black faces with the positive words as they are the negative words. And culturally, we see the other 50% saying, we've been bombarded with negative stereotypes and images, and they're driving in that direction. When you do that to white people almost inevitably say, oh, well, Black people, negative stereotypes, white people, positive stereotypes. And that's the difference in biology and culture, as you're seeing that 50-50 split with Black populations. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, I have more pushback, but I mean, because even culturally, seeing women as powerful, there are some communities who historically have been matriarchies, where women were seen as powerful and decision makers. And so that could be a part of your cultural being, right? Or a historical cultural being, but then at the same time, we still choose white men when we think of powerful. So I don't know. I just think,
No, Nikisha, you're bringing up a great point here. So this is, yes, it's a yes and moment. This is both biological as well as cultural. And we have to consider both when we're looking at these IATs and when we're looking at the decisions that we make. What I presented earlier was strongly biological. Now we're kind of pulling into the cultural piece, and with the Disney movies, right? With Wonder Woman, I mean, you can look at Disney movies too from an ethical perspective. When we present villains, and they're all more stereotypically the other from a white European centric viewpoint, right? They've got accentuated noses if they're Arabic. They've got all kinds of really problematic things that drive these differences that undermine our biology. So it is a yes, and there's no real separation of biology and culture here. But certainly you do see differences in the IAT depending upon the cultural background of the individual. So all of this to say, my ask of each of you is to challenge yourselves by taking some of these IATs. They're free tests. They take about 10 minutes each. We're not going to do them right now because there's just not time. There's too much information I want to give you guys today, but you will have this opportunity. And the goal here is really to raise to your consciousness, to your frontal lobe, some of the biases that you have. And I will challenge you, because you're going to have a very bad day when you do this test, because each of us likes to believe that we don't have those biases. And the reality is, the more we recognize them, the more we raise them to the level of our consciousness, the more power we have to hold up the tools that we need to say, wait a second, I need to slow down here. How am I seeing this person? How am I undermining their value in the world? So I think it's only fair that I tell you my own biases, because I'm not here to preach to you today. I'm here to share with you that I am human too. And when I first took the IATs, almost 20 years ago now, here are my biases. Are you ready? It's the hardest part for me to do. I am biased against Black people, women, short people, fat people, and skinny people. Don't like either of them. Old people, incompetent. Young people, also incompetent. I.e., if you are not me, but in a male body, I don't think you have value, or I think you're less than, subconsciously. Now, I have worked and implemented a lot of the tools I'm going to share with you today, and it's a little unfair because I've worked with this test now so I can get literally any answer I want. But I've significantly changed those biases. So I want to empower you to start where you are and not feel guilty or bad. Just own where you are so that you can begin to move into a different space. The problem is that most humans don't do this because we lock onto our truth, whatever that truth is. All Republicans, all Democrats, those people, that group, the marketing people. We lock onto some truth, and our brain is really good at filtering out anything that might contradict it. I'm not biased, so we don't see all the ways we are. Our brain is so good at this, in fact, that I'm going to show you a quick clip, and I'm just going to ask you to pay close attention. Here we go.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
I was planting my petunias in the potting shed. Constable, arrest Lady Smythe. But how did you know? Madam, as any horticulturist will tell you, one does not plant petunias until May is out. Take her away.
Sorry, madam.
It's just a matter of observation. The real question is, how observant were you?
Ba-da-ba-da-ba-ba. Anybody notice the 21 changes that just occurred in that video?
I think I noticed one.
Saw a couple of them.
Me too.
That's good. That's good. 1 or 2, not bad. If you didn't see anything, don't panic. You're about to see the exact same clip from a slightly different perspective. Here we go.
Action. Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
There's an entirely
I
new
was
human crawling into
polishing
the
the
scene here,
brass
but
in the master
it's fine. Don't worry about it.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
I was planting my petunias in the potting shed. Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
Okay, so easy to miss things we're not looking for. Fair? Yeah. So what are you not looking for in life? Well, 1 or 2 things, like the systems that surround you that have always been there. David Foster Wallace told this incredible story in a commencement speech a few years ago. He talked about this 2 young fish swimming along in the water, and an older fish comes swimming by and he kind of tips his fin their way and says, "Hey boys, how's the water?" And the 2 young fish swim along for a little while longer. And finally one turns to the other and is like, "Dude, what the hell is water?" When you're surrounded by water, when you're surrounded by whatever system you're operating from, it's really difficult to recognize that the water that you're swimming in may be toxic to the fish right next to you, because you'd never think to ask. It's how it is. And this, my friends, is the very concept behind the word that gets me into the most trouble in Vistage. Are you ready for it? Privilege. Now, that word is a tough one for many of us to swallow, but it's so important that we talk about it. And so I want to give you new language to talk about it with yourself, with your families, with your teams. Privilege, to me, is just a tailwind. So I'm a cyclist. You may have noticed I lowered my register when I told you that, because I'm a terrible cyclist. I'm not good at it. I hate it. I do one event every year. It's a 100-mile cycle. And this is me about a dozen years ago. It's the first time I've done this ride. And I'm feeling great. Look at me. I'm at the turnaround. I'm at 50-mile turnaround. I'm like, this is a joke. I totally overtrained for this. And then I turn around and I threw up 3 times on the way back, because I simply hadn't noticed that for the whole first 50 miles, I'd had a tailwind. That's privilege. You don't feel it. It's not your fault. You're not to blame. It just exists. And until
You also changed your shirt.
I did change my shirt. Well, I had the lead for a little bit, which is why I'm in that yellow shirt, and then wah, wah. It was bad. Yeah, so sorry, privilege, right. So you don't notice it, it's not your fault. You're not to blame. It just exists and you don't notice until you turn into that tailwind. So what are the tailwinds that you might have? Well, gentlemen, I'm going to make the argument that potentially you have a slight tailwind when it comes to leadership. But try and take my kids from me in the court of law. Ah, that tailwind flips, doesn't it? Lefties, and do I have any left-handers on the call? This is my favorite one. Yes, thank you. So Andy knows. The rest of you righties, you guys have no idea. Andy and I can't go into a golf pro shop. No, because you guys have all your clubs there. Rifle, Andy, I don't know. I don't know how to shoot, obviously, but they're not designed for us. My biggest argument, cutting knives. You guys know the bevel of the cutting knife that you use to like get those nice sharp corners, designed for right-handers. Andy and I are over here like, I can't quite. Here's the thing. This is meant to be a little humorous. because it's such a small thing, handedness. And yet there's a million products out there that are not designed specifically for Andy and I. Now, what if the entire system, the entire world, the entire water that you swam in wasn't designed for you? And what product or service is your company offering that maybe unintentionally, like Disney, not marketing to an entire population? Well, don't be these guys.
Okay, Noel, we're trying out. I'm saying on it. Two black. Yeah. What are you doing? Come again, Sashi. What are they do? They get. What do you have to do? That's how racialist thing is. Yeah. I have to use that piece of white. It's not nothing. I'm sure again. Again. Nothing again. What's you call on a hand? Man, black man getting fine.
These guys are having some fun with this. This was shot in an Atlanta Marriott a few years ago. Now, I don't think Design Concepts, who came up with this beautiful technology, sat down there like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to make a product that only works for white people. I don't think that was their intention. And yet, here's what they did. They designed a product where you stick your hand underneath, an infrared beam comes down, reflects off the light skin, sets off the sensor, dispenses soap. They tested all of their employees, all white people, and it worked brilliantly. So they shipped the sucker worldwide. Small problem. Infrared doesn't reflect off of darker skin. It gets absorbed, therefore never setting off the sensor, never dispensing soap. Details. Well, not at all, especially not when that same technology is used in medical devices that have become really important in the last 2 years. Pulse oximeters, similar technology, they give false readings 60% of the time on darker skin. This is a major issue. So what product or service is your company offering where you might be unintentionally neglecting an entire population, an entire demographic? And what if you actually focused your efforts on that underserved population? Because your competitors aren't thinking about them. Your competitors are not even noticing their tailwinds. It's not just the quote unquote right thing to do, it's the profitable thing to do. Think about this. How long has Band-Aid been around for?
Very long time.
Ever, yeah. Forever is an appropriate response. Over 100 years. How many colors does Band-Aid come in? One. Until June of 2020, Band-Aid has been coming in, and watch my quotes, flesh colored. June of 2020, they decided, they're like, you know what we should do? This is a crazy idea. We should cover the $1.2 billion market gap that is different skin tones. And now they do. And incidentally, they charge more for them, which is interesting. For too long, I think we've been fighting for the wrong things. I think we've been fighting for equality. Well, this is a ridiculous, preposterous thing because frankly, we're just not equal. So when you apply equal policies across demographics, you get very different results. We're in the middle of the pandemic. Okay, everybody wear a mask. Great, so I put on my Compton hat and my skull mask and I try and look as dangerous as possible and I walk into my local credit union. And what do they say to me? Hey, Dr. Heiss, how can I help you? My brother does the same thing. Very different reaction. There's another population I don't think we've considered. So if you are deaf or hard of hearing, and you rely on my lips to understand the words that are coming out of my mouth right now, can you even tell if I'm speaking with you? And the answer is, of course not, because we haven't considered this tailwind that we have. But Ashley Lawrence has. She's a graduate student. She works with deaf and hard of hearing populations. She's like, hey, guys, we can innovate here. And when we start to look at the tailwinds that we have, we can create new products and services that expand our market. Here's where I think we've gotten stuck. We've gotten stuck in the space of equity. Is it important that we give back more and we have different advantage? Of course it's important. And I think unintentionally we've created more tribalism. The Executive Leadership Council, exclusively Black community. Do I think it's important that we have spaces, safe spaces for people to have discussions? Of course, women's leadership. I get asked to do women's leadership all the time. I'm nervous about that. My first question is who's invited? Because most of the people in power right now are white and they're male. And if you're not hearing the voices and the concerns from these groups, it's a problem. So if you are a white male or you pass as a white male, I want to have just a moment truly where I'm speaking to you. And I mean this deeply with empathy, because I believe that maybe for the first time you're experiencing something here. How many of you have ever been to a women's leadership conference? Okay, so gentlemen, let me invite you to go to a women's leadership conference. It may be the first time that you've ever been a minority in the room, and it will be absolutely terrifying. And when you go, take a deep breath and realize you are no longer you. You're no longer Andy. You're no longer Gary. You're no longer John or RJ. You represent every male, and everything you say can and will be used against you. And that is not your fault. That is just how our brains process. So my ask is that you rip off that duct tape and be willing to make some mistakes. Because the reality is, I get to talk about race really easily. You know why? Nobody looks at me and says, oh, well, she's complaining because she's a person of color. I have a harder time talking about women's inequity. Why? Hi. We need your voices in this. How can we ultimately get to a space of justice, to the removal of these barriers that prevented equal opportunity to begin with? I think it begins by tackling this little monster here. And I think we can begin to change our brains tomorrow by using our biology to work with us rather than against us. Here's how. Here's the first big solution that I'm giving to you guys. And it's a big one. Our brains naturally look for the enemy, for the other, for the different. So let's give our brains the enemy. Let's just not make it about race, gender, political affiliation, whatever. Here's the best way I know how to describe it. So I happen to be a huge Boston Red Sox fan. Sorry, guys. Did I lose everybody? I lost one person. All right. Okay. All right. Bear with me. Huge Boston Red Sox fan. So back in the day, I would go to Fenway as frequently as possible because I'd walk in and immediately I'm among my tribe. You're wearing the right colors. They got the right logos on. We're hugging each other. We're buying beers for complete strangers. And it's not that we don't see race, age, gender, political affiliation. Heaven forbid it comes up. We see that. It just doesn't matter. Do you know why? Those losers. The second those Yankees take the field, all of those individual differences that might have caused squabbles between us disappear because all of our focus is on that clear, common, external enemy. It's incredibly powerful. And major corporations have figured out the power of the clear, common, external enemy. Burger King, who's their common enemy?
McDonald's.
Coke?
Pepsi.
You guys see how this works. Now, I would hate to think you'd only ever rise to the level of your competitors. We can do better than that. We don't want to just be the Yankees. We want to crush the Yankees. So how do we begin to move beyond just a sheer competition? Well, I think it becomes important to have an abstract common enemy. So a few years ago, I'm a bit of a klutz, and a few years ago, I fell and I broke my foot. And I'm sitting in the ER, kind of bored, as you do. And a gentleman is fixing the door. So I kind of hobble up to him. I'm like, hey, psst, what you doing? Now, for all intents and purposes, he should have said to me, I'm fixing the door here, crazy lady. But that's not what he said. He said, man, at this hospital, it's our mission to reduce patient pain. When patients are pushed through that door, the door sticks and it jars them a little bit. So I'm just here reducing patient pain. How powerful is it when your surgeons, your anesthesiologists, your doctors, your maintenance workers, your receptionists, you're all united by a single common mission, driven by That clear common enemy. You heard it. I think. Pain. Patient pain. Who is your clear common enemy for your organization? We're going to take about 5 minutes to try and work through our clear common enemies for our organizations. Here's how this works. What I want you to do is I want you to think about what your organization does better than any other. What do you do better than your competitors? So for Zappos, do you remember Zappos, the shoe company before they were bought by Amazon? What do they do better than everybody else?
Got you shoes quick and let you return them.
Bingo. Quick service. You can return them. So excellent customer service. Great. So their clear common enemy, poor customer service. Now, that was an okay common enemy, but it's not visceral. It doesn't like drive you that emotional drive like patient pain might. So the more emotional you can make it, the more powerful it becomes. So think about what happens if your organization isn't there, or what happens if a client goes to your competitor. What do they lose? So I'm working with a nonprofit right now, and we were doing this exercise, and they're like, we fight against mediocrity. Well, that's pretty good. And we got a little bit deeper. Well, we fight against poverty. Ah, okay. Now we're getting somewhere. Because if it's 5 o'clock and I'm, having to fill out some paperwork and I'm looking at the clock, if I know that my job is fighting against poverty, well, I'm staying till 5:05, no problem. And this becomes a huge recruiting tool as well. When you think about it, let's say, Andy, you're recruiting, and for you guys offer excellent customer service. And you're telling me, the candidate, well, here we supply excellent customer service. And RJ is over here saying, yeah, well, we fight against poverty. I know where I'm going. At this company, we fight against poverty. It's pretty powerful.
Welcome aboard, Rebecca.
You what?
Welcome aboard. Thanks for joining.
Yeah. So I'm assuming that's what you're doing, RJ?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, your clear common enemy is going to be a lot easier than the rest of ours, probably. And this is the case, right? It's harder to find certain common enemies that drive an entire organization for some organizations than it is for others. But my challenge to you is to find that purpose that is going to ring true for people in the C-suite and people on the line and everybody in between. Because if you're united against that common enemy, the more powerful it becomes. So I'll give you one more example that I think everybody's familiar with. As a former New Yorker, right after 9/11, that city was the friendliest place on earth, as long as you were non-Muslim, because we had a clear, common external enemy. People were holding doors for each other, were walking each other through. You can create an incredibly powerful, clear, common enemy that will unite your team. So, Francine, can you put us into groups here? Just 2 or 3 people to the group, whatever works out math-wise. I'm only going to give you 5 minutes for this. Do you guys understand the task at hand? Work together to come up with your clear common enemy for your organization. Cool? See you in 5.
Give them a couple more seconds. Rebecca, you don't want to be in a group, right?
I could be, but if it works out that there's it's better than that. Yeah. And don't panic. 5 minutes is not enough time. That's by design. Don't worry.
There we go.
Perfect. All right. Well, I'll see you in 5, and I'll give them a break after this exercise so they can.
Got it.
Cool.
Recording.
Oh, yeah.
We just remembered, which is perfect timing. So here's what's gonna happen. Most of you are like, cool, I'll just do this. That's all right. Oh, no, you will not. I need to see your biggest, baddest, boldest moves. If I don't see people like laning out, I'm gonna be really disappointed. All right, 10 seconds, there's no music. By the way, if you're in your office and there's windows, even better. All right. There's no music, so you can't be wrong. It's gonna stress you out a little bit. Are you ready? Let's go, come on, 10 seconds. Okay, stop, quickly look around. What do you see? What do you see? What do you see? What do you see?
Awesomeness.
Okay, RJ wins the award of best performance, I think, today. That was epic. What do you guys see?
Discomfort.
Okay, there was some
Smiles.
discomfort.
Laughing.
I see a lot of smiles.
Yeah, joy.
Which is interesting.
Enjoyment.
Right? Yeah, that was supposed to be stressful, y'all. Why wasn't it stressful? I think.
Because we were all doing it.
Because we were all doing it. Yep.
There it is. There it is. So now, let's see. Just you, Nikisha. I'm joking. Don't worry. I'm joking. So we all did that together. I think I gave you a clear common enemy. You're welcome.
Mhm.
Sometimes as leaders, we have to step into that space of being the clear common enemy for our organization. And it is really hard because we want to be liked. We want to be accepted and loved and not rejected. And we're walking in going, okay, guys, we're going to boogie. Sorry, I'm with you. Let's go.
Yeah.
So what if I did just single you out? I already picked on you, so I'm going to pick on Anita. Hi, Anita. Welcome to Vistage. So Anita, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to sing. Don't worry, between you and me, you don't actually have to do this, okay? I'm going to have you sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, soprano style, lots of vibrato. Now, let's just say Anita does this. And Anita, I'm sorry, you're terrible. You're terrible, but she does it. How do you guys feel about Anita?
We think she was brave to do it.
Proud of her.
Proud, brave,
A for effort.
bravo. Okay, what if she does it and she's good? How do we feel about her?
The same. I feel the same way.
Yeah, right? Brave, proud, bravo. So we're having positive emotions no matter what. Yeah. So what stops us? Hey, fear of rejection. Yeah, right here. So what if we were able to just say, okay, I hear you. I see you. I don't need you anymore. How powerfully can we show up for ourselves when we no longer are surrounded by ants? Not these creepy crawly things, but what happens in our brains, these automatic negative thoughts, where Anita thinks, well, of course anybody else could do that, but if I did it, it would be a negative thing. No, it'd be the same as if anybody else did it. But our brains are full of these automatic negative thoughts because they kept us alive and healthy and within our tribes. And they're not particularly useful today. So we have to find ways to interject and interrupt these automatic negative thoughts. That's where awareness alarms come into play. All right. So anybody set an alarm clock to wake up in the mornings? Yeah. You start to wake up a few minutes before that alarm clock goes off because you've trained your brain to become conscious at a particular time. That's great. So let's use that same training when we're already awake to eke out slightly more conscious time throughout the day. Here's how it works. I want you to set 5 alarms to go off throughout the day at regularly scheduled intervals. It's going to suck for about a week. All right. But I promise you, your brain will adapt pretty quickly to this. When the alarm goes off, I want you to do your ABCs. All right. Here's what that looks like. A, ask right now, is there a tiger? What I mean by that is, are you in a life and death situation? Is there a snake or a tiger or something charging you where you're actually going to die? 99.99999% of the time, your answer is going to be no, that's not a tiger. In which case that stress, that anxiety that you're feeling is hindering you, It's not helping you. So we can let go of that and move on to B. Breath. Take a breath. Now listen, I know you guys have been told a bazillion times, take a deep breath, right? And there's good reason for that. We don't value the breath because it's free and it's accessible and we do it all day, every day, subconsciously. Thank God, by the way, because if you had to consciously breathe all day long, that's all you'd be doing. But when you do slow down and take a conscious breath, what you're doing is you're lighting up this frontal lobe where you can start making positive conscious decisions from. Now, I'm going to give you a specific type of breath because as a stress physiologist, this is the one breath that we know scientifically shown to reduce cortisol instantaneously. I mean, shed a ton of cortisol. It's called a physiological sigh. And you guys have done it before. You just probably aren't aware of it. When you sob and you go, that's a physiological sigh. That is your body trying to get you back into balance. So here's what happens when we're really stressed out or we're going throughout the day. What ends up happening is we begin to breathe very shallowly. And as we breathe shallowly, the ends of our lungs where the alveoli exchange our gas collapse. And when they collapse, they trap CO2 in our lungs, which means our gas exchange is out of balance. We've got too much CO2, which stresses us out and exacerbates this stress cycle. So we've got to find a way to get that CO2 out of our lungs and back into a normal breathing pattern. We do that with a physiological sigh. Here's what it looks like. We're going to breathe in through our nose as deeply as we can. You get to that place where you can't take in any more oxygen. You're going to open your mouth and go, then and only then are you going to exhale through your mouth as deeply and as much as you can. We're going to practice this together. We're going to do 2 physiological sighs. And I just want you to feel the difference. Just notice where you are right now. Okay. Now in through your nose, really as deeply as you can. Like jello, isn't it? Good stuff. That takes 15 seconds. You've asked yourself, all right, I'm not in a life and death situation. Cool. I'm going to take a couple breaths and then I'm going to get curious. Because if I feel like I'm getting rejected, like if I feel this stress of a decision that I'm going to make, that I'm going to make it wrong and I'm going to do it wrong, how can I change this? How can I get curious about it? When we ask questions like the tiger, we're using tools to see the world differently. We're able to see a different truth. So by asking questions like, well, what are you seeing? Curiosity and fear can't live together. And so we're able to see a new perspective. For me, my favorite question to ask, it's not really a question, but to carry the conversation forward is yes, and. So frequently when we get into these modes of defense because we're scared, because our tribe is going to reject us, because we have a different opinion than them, we just acquiesce and we're like, okay, whatever you need me to be, I'll become that thing. I'll accept that opinion. Or we hear somebody else who thinks differently from us and we're like, no. How many of you have ever brought a terrible idea to somebody? All right, I'll let you off the hook. No, you haven't. No, you haven't. You bring your best ideas. They may turn out to be terrible, but when you bring them to somebody, you're not like, oh my God, I can't wait to tell you this terrible idea. No, you're super excited. You've got this great idea. So let's see. Tara's going to bring me her idea. Tara, I'm sorry. It's a terrible idea. How many more times is Tara coming to me with a good idea, bad idea, or otherwise? But what if instead I said, okay, Tara, yeah, yes. I'm stepping fully into her truth with a single word. Yeah. Okay. And Tara, have you considered how that affects X, Y, and Z? Now I've empowered Tara to recognize, oh, this is a terrible idea. Alternatively, Tara may look at me and say, well, yeah, Rebecca, of course I've looked at X, Y, and Z. And did you consider A, B, and C? Oh, Tara, I hadn't even looked at A, B, and C. I'd been so focused over here on X, Y, and Z. I hadn't even considered A, B, and C. And actually, this isn't a terrible idea at all. It'll save our company millions. But when we get into this stressed out state, we can't see other opportunities. We can't see the power of perspective. And so yes, and is a way to continue the conversation. It's used in improv all the time to carry the conversation forward. If I say, we're on a spaceship, and Tara's like, no, we're not. We're in a submarine. Well, never the two shall meet, right? But if instead she accepts fully my truth first and says, oh, and as the spaceship comes crashing down to Earth and goes into the ocean, now she's put us where we both of our truths can live. Our brain hates this because our brain believes one truth, only truth. This is the only perspective I want to see. That's why it filters everything else out. But in reality, the more we can consider these truths, the better leader we can become. So I want to empower you to use yes and frequently in your dialect. I'm going to tell you the one time that I got it right because I'm the speaker. So I'm not going to tell you all the times that I screw this up. But for the first half of my career, I studied these big, beautiful birds right here, the American crow. Now, I had a dedicated phone line, true story, where the public would call in and they'd ask me questions about crows. Your tax dollars at work, my friends. All right. So I got any number of very interesting phone calls. This call happened to be one of my favorites. A woman called in and she just asked me point blank, yes, can a crow be a spirit animal? And I was like, lady, you call a science lab. What are you thinking? No, I didn't. I put on my very best Francine hat and I was like, okay, tell me more about that. And she said, well, I'm cross-country skiing. I fall, I break my leg badly, compound fracture. I'm in trouble. I don't think I can make it home. But suddenly a crow appears and it guides me. It stays with me as I drag myself the whole way home. Crow's waiting for you to die. I mean, that's my obvious response, right? Like it's so clear to me. My truth is right here. So what do I say to this woman? Can a crow be a spirit animal? Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
Just waiting for your spirit to leave your body.
Oh my God, that was the best answer ever. Anita, I have given this presentation over 300 times. Nobody's ever said that before, but I've used it here on out. That is brilliant. I mean, look, yeah, can a crow be a spirit? I don't know. Sure. Actually, I believe that in her story, if she hadn't believed that this crow was her spirit animal, she wasn't making it home. So, yeah, crow can be a spirit animal. I don't. And have you considered that crow is waiting for that spirit to leave your body so it can eat your eyeballs? Now, I'm not certain that I said it quite so delicately. But the reality is, because I stepped fully into her truth first, by accepting her truth, by saying just, yeah, and she stepped fully into mine. Too frequently, especially you can see this on social media, it's just this, no, that, this, that, this, that. And if we don't invite other people's truths, they're not going to see our truth. So getting curious, that third step, is essential in overcoming our fears. It's especially essential when somebody tells us the truth about ourselves that we don't want to hear. This is the most dangerous thing. And this is why so many of us aren't self-aware as leaders. Because, well, 95% of us believe that we are self-aware. And only about 10 to 15% of us actually are. And when it comes to the executive suite, that number goes down to about 5%. And that's not necessarily your fault. It's difficult to get feedback. It's scary to get feedback. Have any of you done a 360 review before? Familiar with 360 reviews? John, how was it? Gary, how was it? Pat, how was it?
First few times you got it. I mean, it's eye-opening, but that's the whole goal. But it's harder to get people to do it without the anonymity of the 360.
Yeah, perfect. Well said. It's eye-opening, which I'm going to interpret as, oh my gosh, I got some feedback that I wasn't anticipating, which is great, right? But it's very scary. It's a very vulnerable spot because you're asking people, your superiors, the people that work with you, people that report to you, to give you honest, open feedback. And that's terrifying. And most people, it sounds like, John, you've had this a few times. Most people maybe get this once a year, which is something. But what if you could have this feedback 365 days of the year? Now, when I tell you this, I tell you that I created a product that nobody needs because we all believe that we're self-aware. And when we find out that we're not, nobody wants, because that's a terrifying prospect to get that kind of feedback all the time. So I'm going to gift this to you. And my ask is simply that you use it. It's an app. It's called Acuity. And it's a 360 review at your fingertips, 365 days of the year. Here's how it works. You choose from a list of about 95 traits and skill sets, the feedback that you want for yourself. 3 traits at a time. Now you can test all 95 traits throughout a few weeks, but only 3 at a time. So managerial skills, team skills, listening skills, how empathetic am I? Whatever those skills are that you want feedback on. Then you rate yourself on a sliding scale, 1 to 10. How cooperative, how kind, how whatever it is. And then you send out this survey to your friends, family, colleagues, coworkers, and they rate you anonymously over the course of a week. You're never sure exactly when they're getting that poll drip to them. They don't need the app. They can rate you on email. They can rate you on the web. They can rate you by text message. And at the end of the week, the poll closes and you see where your gaps are between where you think you show up in the world and how people say you actually show up in the world. So when I was beta testing this, I gave this to my family and I was like, I'm gonna test myself on humor. I think I'm pretty funny. So I rated myself. I'm like a 6, 7. I'm like a 7 out of 10. I'm pretty funny. And I sent it to my family. 2s. They gave me 2s, Andy. 2s. And I immediately did the thing that all leaders do. I'm like, nah, they don't know me. They must have had a bad day. No, it's my family. They know me. And within my family, I'm a 2. I'm not that funny. I've come from a really funny family. They don't value me for my humor. They do, however, value me for my empathy. See, I don't think I'm a particularly empathetic person, but within my family, that's what they value me for. Now I get to show up to a family challenge with a strength that I'm valued for rather than trying to make jokes. What a powerful position to be in. And here's the big fear. The big fear is, well, I don't want to know what my family thinks of me. I don't want to know that I'm not funny. Listen, my family thinks I'm not funny, whether or not I know it or not. It's just information. And when you have the information, you actually get to do something about it. So I want to challenge you to use this. You can download it onto your phone. This is the onboarding. The only thing you really need to pay attention to is step 4. Do you have a referral code? And the answer is, yeah, you do. VIS11DEC. You can use that. You'll have Acuity for free for your life. Right? Here's what I can promise you. When you get some feedback, we know that self-awareness generates stronger relationships, better communication, more profitable companies, and more creative and confident decisions. What I can't promise you is that you won't be thrown some lemons. And when life throws you lemons, what are you supposed to do?
Make
lemonade.
I hate that saying so much because life isn't throwing you lemons and sugar. It's just freaking throwing you lemons. So just bite the lemon. Just own it. It's okay not to be funny all the time. It's not a permanent situation. It's not pervasive and it's not personal. It's just information. And the more we can accept that and say, oh, this isn't a tiger. Ask, it's not a tiger. Take a breath and then get curious. How can I use my strength here? The less we have to fear. So I want to close out this section by giving you some exercises, some of these safe forms of discomfort. Certainly getting feedback is one of the biggest forms of discomfort that you can have, safe forms of discomfort that you can have. But here's a few others. And my challenge to you is Francie's going to hold you accountable to doing one of these things this month. I'd love it if you did the whole list, because I promise you, if you check off the boxes for each of these things this month, you will no longer have any fear of rejection. And I promise you, it is one of the most powerful ways to operate in the world. So with that, you don't have to fear rejection anymore. You're going to stretch that discomfort shortcut in your brain. By the way, who's committing to something there? Anybody have something they're like, oh, I'll do that one? Or which one do you not want to do? That's the better way to ask it, because truly it's the one that you're like, oh my gosh, I would never do that. That's the one that you need to do.
Try to get on the intercom at the grocery store.
Oh my gosh. Nikisha, let me tell you, be prepared, because that was a double whammy for me, because I went up and I'm nervous and I'm like stressed out, and I ask, and then they're like, yeah, sure. And I was like, oh my God, I have to have something to say. I have nothing to say. Secondary panic, right? Awesome. Okay, guys. Easy. That's all. All we have to do is stretch that discomfort, which only leaves failure. Failure is fun, because as little kids, we don't have a fear of failure. We don't. We're looking around and we're like, oh man, Gary's falling off of his bike, Pat's falling off of his bike, Andy's falling, Barry's falling, we're all falling off bikes. This is great. And then we hit a certain age, which we have all hit. And suddenly we look around and we're like, oh God, Gwen knows the things, John knows, Andy knows the things, I don't know the things. How did I get on this call? Even I know all the things they don't know. And this, my friends, is called Imposter Syndrome. Because we all believe that everybody else knows all the things that somehow we missed. And we're terrified that we're going to expose ourselves as being the one person who doesn't know all the things. So what if you went in just saying, I don't know the things. I'm going to screw this up. I like to practice what I preach. And so I look for opportunities to fail. I had a great opportunity to fail because I had an opportunity to become a race car driver for a weekend. And I was like, this is cool. I will definitely fail at this. So I went in and, okay, I'll be honest with you. Between you and me, I didn't think I was actually going to fail. I was like, it's driving. How hard can this be? I'm going to go in and show these guys what's up. So let me show you how this weekend actually went. This is me driving. You're in the car with me now. My husband is in front of me. He's an actual race car driver, and the instructor is in front of him. So you can see it's 11:52 in the morning. I've been doing this all morning. I'm like, this isn't so hard. You just drive a car fast in a circle. Not such a big deal. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and pass these guys on this curve because I feel like, slow in, fast out. I got this. Slow in. I'm going to pass them right here. Yeah. It gets muted here because there's some choice words that are coming out of my mouth. This is how I spent most of the weekend. I gotta be honest. I got out of this car and I was pissed. I was really upset because I was feeling this failure hard. And I was like, I don't want to be a loser. Can't lose my status. I got to prove myself. I have to win. I can't be wrong. Man, I don't want to look foolish. Now, I'm guessing a few of you have felt this way before. And I'm leaned up against the fence post and I'm like, pull yourself together there, Heiss. You coach people on this. You came out here today to fail. Of course I didn't, right? Because none of us ever come out to fail. But I'm really stressed out and I'm trying to work through this. And an instructor comes up and he leans up against the fence post with me. He goes, Beck, there's two types of drivers out there. There's drivers like your husband, and he's pretty good. And I was like, okay, I don't need to hear this. This is not okay, because I'm stuck where most people get stuck when we talk about failure. I'm caught in external failure. And external failure is just a comparison mode. Oh, my husband's good, huh? So that must mean, oh, he's winning, so I must be successful. I see how this plays out. It's binary thinking. So this guy goes on, he's like, your husband's pretty good, but he's never going to be great. And I was like, ooh, tell me more about that. He says he's never going to be great until he does the thing that you did about 6,000 times, until he pushes himself harder and faster than he knows that car can go. He'll never find his not yet point. And I was like, yeah, okay. So what you're saying is that I am the good kind of driver. And he's like, no, drivers like you, they usually quit. Now we get to the type of failure that I believe is the only true type of failure. And it's not quitting. Don't hear that. There's a time and a place for quitting. The only true type of failure, I believe, is a core failure, when you compromise your own values, promise, and worth. Most people say that the opposite of success is failure. I think the opposite of success is not going all in. It's not getting back in the car. It's not playing all in. It's what 8-year-old me did. It's not if you win or lose, it's whether you play the game, right? It's showing up. So what if we tweaked this a little bit in our brains? And instead of looking at all the ways that we're failing, which our brain's really good at, we said, well, what was the partial success that I had on that last turn? Well, I learned something. I learned that I was accelerating just a second too early. So it's actually a pretty good success. And when we start to train our brains to say, no, it's not fail, either you win or you die. It's, oh, either you win or you learn something. Our brains begin to separate this massive fear we have with failure. Because if you guys think back, I guarantee you, your biggest failures, whatever you name as your biggest failure, also was the point when you gained the most wisdom in life. So I'm going to give you a tool to help you in the future as you're thinking through your failures. So many of us get caught in these decisions. And actually, Gwen, I think you've started the day off by telling you one of your biggest fears, right, is making the wrong decision.
Yes.
What if I do this? What if I make the wrong decision? What if I don't do this? Well, define the fear very clearly. What's going to happen if you make that decision and it's the wrong one? What will happen? Then how do we prevent that from happening? What does the partial success look like? But if even the worst case scenario were true, if this fear, this very worst case scenario came true, how can we repair it? When we start to write down these fears, this is called fear setting. It's a tool used by Tim Ferriss. I steal it directly from him. I wish I could take credit. But when we start to outline these tools very directly, they become a lot less threatening to us. And I think actually we're pretty good at doing this already. Here's what we're not good at. What we're not good at naturally doing is, well, what if I don't do it? What's the cost of inaction? So what if I don't get back in that car? Mentally, physically, financially, 6 months from now, a year from now, 3 years from now, where am I? What if I don't make that decision? What if I don't go all in? Where am I? And this is where our brains are really bad at analyzing. What if we don't play all in? That's where people end up with real regrets. I think what ends up happening is we put ourselves into these positions where we are just expecting ourselves, because others expect of us, that we're the expert. So we have to make the right decision because we wouldn't be the expert otherwise. And the problem here is that we're actually not as experts as we think. Now listen, you wouldn't be on the call if you weren't an expert at something. You're an expert at counting, yes? To 10 letters of the English alphabet. Pretty confident we're experts at this. So I want to give you a challenge. My challenge is this. I want you simply to count the number of F's in that sentence. Show me with your fingers. How many F's in that sentence? 2, 3, 3, 3, 2, 2, 4, 3, 5, 3, 3, 2, 6, 3. Some of you just want to give me one finger. I totally get it. 5, 6, 5, 3. Okay, guys, we're going to do this together. It's all right. It's cool. Most of you got finished files and scientific. Yeah. Where we failed was of there's 7. What's going on? You guys told me you were experts at this. You're expert. I know you're experts. What's going on is I think we have a story in place, right? And the story that we have in place is that F says, finish, files, scientific, no problem. There's no F. It's irrelevant. Our brain just filters it right out. It's like, it's not playing by the same rules. It doesn't make any, it's irrelevant. Same way, by the way, how many of you have led through a pandemic before? No?
Now we have.
Yes, 1. You've done it. You're there. You're doing it. My guess is you don't have experience that allows you to have a rule in place of how to do these things. We don't have that yet. So we're doing our very best to get through these uncertain times. By the way, who knows what tomorrow is going to look like? You can't be an expert in all these things, even if you have rules in place that are going to help you in certain situations. So when we allow ourselves to step back, we can begin to ask for new definitions of, well, what does good leadership look like? What does winning look like? What does failing look like? I got really curious about this because I'm a biologist. When I first started speaking to business folks, I was like, EBITDA? What is that? Just a bunch of letters thrown together? That doesn't even, somebody said that. I was like, that's not even a thing. It sounds like a marine mammal. So I felt like a major outsider when it came to leadership. So what I decided to do was I did the nerdiest thing I could think of, and I got all of the top 10 leadership books from the last 10 years, and I put them all together, and I put them in an Excel spreadsheet, and then I ran some basic analytics on it so I could understand what good leadership looks like. Here's what I learned. Are you ready? If you're going to have a book, the top 10 leadership books in the last 10 years, the cover of it must be red. The second thing I learned is that you also must be written by a white male. 91% of these books are written by white men. Now, let me full stop here. Read these books. I'm not trying to admonish you, white men. These are good books. These are really good books. Read these books. And if you want to be the non-expert and actually have an alternative perspective and maybe read outside of your comfort zone, there's a whole list of books that are being overlooked. And if you want to relate to your customers, to your consumers, to your employees, to yourself better, we probably need to be reading outside of this list. When we're willing to be the non-expert and get new opinions, new ideas, we actually come to more creative solutions. This is my favorite example of a non-expert. His name is Cliff Young. He was a 61-year-old farmer when he showed up to arguably the most difficult ultra marathon of all time, from Sydney to Melbourne, Australia. You guys, that is a 500-mile long race. And this guy, he's never run a 5K before. He's just like, I don't know. I chased my sheep. I think I can do it. So he shows up at the starting line. And of course, all of the elite runners are looking at him like, okay, good luck, dude. Go get him, Tiger. And the starting gun goes off. The elite athletes take off. And here's Cliff just kind of shuffling along. So he shocks the world when 5 days, 15 hours, and 4 minutes later, he crosses the finish line. A full 2 hours ahead of the first elite runner. How'd he do it?
Do you have any preconceived expectations?
Slow and steady wins the race.
Yep.
Both things true. And he was a non-expert. He didn't know what the elite runners knew. All the elite runners had elite trainers who knew how to win the race. And in order to win this race, you have to run for 18 hours a day and sleep for 6. Cliff didn't know that. So he just kind of ran for about 5 days, 15 hours, and 4 minutes. The race has never been the same. So frequently when we're willing to be that non-expert, we come to the obvious solutions that are right in front of our faces that we've just overlooked. So if we're willing to set aside our fear of failure, our fear of getting it wrong, we can show up to get it right without having to show up to be right. It's a huge difference. Showing up to be right versus showing up to get it right. Now, people like me struggle with this. I'm a speaker. I've got a whole bunch of degrees that say that I know something. And so I want to show you guys, and I show up to prove myself every time. So I've had to adopt something called WAIT. And the acronym stands for, why am I talking? Usually I just need to shut up and listen. But if I am talking, am I talking to be right? Am I just going to drive it home until you finally get it? Or am I talking to get it right? Am I asking questions? Am I being curious? Am I staying open? Am I recognizing that I don't have to have a tiger charging at me? I'm okay. Exercise that weight. Because so frequently we believe that we have to be these superheroes. We have to be this invulnerable superhero. And the reality is even Superman had kryptonite. So what if we had this story changed up and we're like, okay, Superman spent his whole life running away from kryptonite. What if instead he'd been like, hey, world, kryptonite, it's a problem for me. Well, what does that do? That actually empowers his entire team. When he flaunts his kryptonite, now his team is like, oh, there's kryptonite. Guess what? Wonder Woman is not affected by kryptonite. She can come in and be like, I got this one. Kryptonite doesn't bother me. But by the way, when there's something else that's going to be a problem for me, you can come in. When we're willing to be vulnerable, when we're willing to not have all the answers, we actually show up better for our teams and for ourselves. This is known as the Pratt Effect. Now, you may think that exposing your weaknesses, flaunting your kryptonite, makes you look worse, but it turns out the exact opposite is true. I've updated this Pratt Effect. I call it the Jennifer Lawrence effect. Here's why. We all love Jennifer Lawrence. There's nobody that's like, oh, I can't stand it. Everybody loves Jennifer Lawrence. Why do we love Jennifer Lawrence so much? I think it's because she falls at red carpet events. She says things she's not supposed to. And when we see that, we're like, ha, I would do that. That's me. Oh my gosh, I see her humanity. And we love her for it. When the Pratt Effect was first studied, there was a setup with two separate conditions. And in the first condition, an interviewee would walk in and he would answer the questions of the panel. And he got 90% of the questions correct. And then he left. In the second interview, exact same setup. The guy walks in, answers the questions of the panel, 90% accuracy, really good interview. But just before he leaves, oh, clumsy, he spills a cup of coffee on himself. That's it. It's the only difference between the two. Who gets hired?
Second guy.
Coffee guy. Who's rated as more trustworthy? Coffee guy. More likable? Coffee guy. Higher leadership potential? Coffee guy. For spilling a cup of coffee? Yeah, for being human. For being human. We don't need superheroes. We don't need people with all the answers. We don't need people who don't fail. We need you, exactly as you are, showing up. That takes off our fear of failure. So guys, that was easy. We got through 3 major fears in 2.5 hours. There's just one small thing I need to add on to this. We know how to get through these fears, but our brain still needs to be trained. Now, the good news in this is that our brains are highly trainable. Our brains are one of the most adaptable pieces of our bodies. It's incredible. Your brain is different right now, having just heard that sentence, than it was 2 seconds ago before I said that sentence. What? Your brain is doing something called live wiring, which means it's constantly adjusting and firing and doing things to adapt to the environment that you're in. That's remarkable. And we know this because you remember the first time that you drove a car? Your hands are 10 and 2, and you're like, oh my gosh, there's pedestrians and street signs and speedometers, and how am I supposed to pay attention to all of this? And today, if you drove, you're like one hand on the wheel, leaned back, talking on your cell phone, screaming at the kids in the back. You're not even paying attention. That's great. Because what that means is that you've trained your subconscious brain to drive for you. And if you can train your subconscious brain to do a complex and ever-changing task like driving, you can certainly train it to override these stories, shortcuts, biases, instincts that no longer serve you. So, as you're training your brain, this is the thing that I need you to remember. Your brain is insanely powerful. So use caution with the story you're telling. What story are you telling yourself again and again and again? This is my favorite research of all time. A group of housekeepers was split into 2 different conditions. So just a quick bias check. We all just pictured white men, yes? Okay, you're supposed to laugh, it's okay. It's okay, remember that makes us human, makes you human, all good. So 2 different conditions. In the first condition, the housekeepers were told nothing. In the second condition, they were simply told, hey, do you know that when you're cleaning, you're actually meeting the Surgeon General's requirement for exercise? That's it. It's the only difference between the 2 groups. They all wore these nifty-difty wristwatches which track exertion level and heart rate, and diet was factored out of the analysis. And yet after 4 weeks' time, there was a massive difference between the 2 groups. The group that was simply told that they were meeting the Surgeon General's requirement for exercise, lower weight, lower blood pressure, lower body fat, lower waist to hip ratio, and a lower body mass index. I read that study and I was like, you are an athlete. You know all the things you've got. Thank you for laughing. I appreciate it. I'm also a skeptic. And I'm like, no way. The scientists missed something here. Obviously, like there's no way. It's just mindset. It's just the story that they're telling. So I dig back into the research and I find more research that supports this. And then I find more research that supports this. And ultimately I get to do some research that supports this. And so I'm forced to come to the conclusion that we are a bit too dismissive of the placebo effect. Oh, well, that's just the story that your brain is telling. Yeah, it's crazy powerful. What story are you telling? In fact, the placebo effect is one of the reasons that we're in the middle of a pharmaceutical crisis in this country right now. Because in order to get a drug past the next level of testing, it has to meet a 90% efficacy rating. That's good. You want your pharmaceuticals to work. The trouble is placebos typically come in right at about 80% efficacy. Sugar pills. You guys, that is not a whole lot of difference between a biologically active substance and what your brain believes is a biologically active substance. That's wild. So what story are you telling? When was the last time you listened to the stories that you're telling? Does anybody have a meditation practice? One person, two people. If I see a lot of people going, yeah. Okay, so if you're anything like me, the first time somebody told you you need a meditation practice, you're like, yeah, that's woo-woo. I don't do the woo. That was me. I was like, it's woo-woo. And then I dug into the science and I was like, oh my gosh. Lower cortisol, lower anxiety, changes you epigenetically. So you pass those things on to your offspring, adjust the brain cell growth in your frontal lobe. You literally grow more brain cells. And I was like, okay, all right, I'm doing it. I'm going to do the thing. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to clear my head of all thoughts. Yeah. How'd that go for you guys? You've all tried this, right? You sit down and you're like, I'm going to clear my head of all thoughts.
Not easy.
Right? There they all are. So if you've tried this and you're like, I suck at meditating, I can't do it. No, you're hearing those thoughts. You're doing it. That's the whole practice, guys. You're hearing the things that are driving you all day long. It's why we measure anything in business to say, oh, is this a helpful thing? Or do I need to change this? So when you're hearing that thought and you're like, wow, that's not very helpful. You just say, please go away. And then it'll come right back. And you please go away. And it'll come right back. And then please go away. And eventually you start to have a little more control over the thoughts that you're having. These thoughts drive us so much more than we recognize. Because remember those ants that we started talking about with rejection, those automatic negative thoughts? About 70 to 80% of your thoughts are automatically negative. If that's the perspective that you're being driven by every day, that's a problem. And we find that about 93% of your thoughts are repetitive. They're just constantly going back to the same thoughts again and again and again. We've got to find new ways to groove different thoughts in there. So how do we start to smush these ants? How do we get rid of those automatic negative thoughts? Well, if any of you ever tried to quit a really difficult habit, maybe like smoking, or you've watched somebody try and quit smoking, it's hard because your brain has this pattern, this groove that it's done for a long time, the same way it's done these automatic negative thoughts for a long time. And usually what happens is they form neural loops like this. So if you break a habit, you have to replace it with something. For smokers, that's usually gum chewing, right? You replace this habit. So if we're smushing ants, what are we going to replace them with? And this is where things get really cheesy. Are you ready for it? We're going to replace them with the cute fuzzies, with practice enlightened thoughts, pets. Now listen, pets take just as much work in real life as they do when I'm talking about them in your head. These practice enlightened thoughts are those positive affirmations that I know you guys are probably rolling your eyes at right now. And yet, when we look at the science behind those positive affirmations, what we find, higher productivity, longer longevity, better health, better relationships, higher salaries. Like these are crazy things for telling yourself something. Yes, but you have to do it right. So if you ever watched the 1990s SNL character Stuart Smalley, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it. Yeah, you guys are, there it is. People like me. Look, we laugh at that, and yet he was darn close to being on to something. The small tweak we need to make is instead of saying, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, because if you don't believe it, it's not helping you. Instead, we have to talk to ourselves the way LeBron James talks about LeBron James. LeBron James talks about LeBron James in the third person. If you've ever heard him talk, he's like, LeBron James does what's right for LeBron James. Because what he's doing is he's separating, he's giving some emotional distance. So it sounds like he's coaching himself. We are much better at hearing things coming from the outside. So to create that emotional space, all we have to do is change, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me, to Rebecca, you're good enough. You are smart enough, and doggone it, people like you. It's just a third person switch. So here's what I want to roll up. I want to give the most common automatic negative thoughts that we've gone through throughout the day. We ended with failure. We had rejection in there. We have people. So let's go back through these. And as we're smushing these automatic negative thoughts, let's find ways to replace them. So common automatic negative thought, I'm a failure. Can't do it right. Got it. Just, I'm going to look like garbage in front of these people. What if we change that to, oh, I'm not ready yet. Never done this before. Here's how I'm going to prepare myself. See, when I say I'm a failure, all that does is get me stuck in the corner just with my arms crossed. There's no action there. So here's how I'm going to prepare myself. Just not ready yet. This next automatic negative thought breaks my heart more than any other, because I don't know a single person that doesn't have this on repeat in their heads. And it's something, Francine, you kicked off the whole meeting with. Are you ready? I'm not worthy. I'm not enough. I don't belong. Everybody else here has this figured out. It is heartbreaking to me because very few people have asked themselves this question. For whom? Who are you trying to be worthy for? For a parent? For a group? For offspring? For who? For a spouse? If you aren't accepting yourself, how are they supposed to accept you? So what if instead you decided that you were worthy? You showed up as worthy, valuable, and enough as you are. Then you actually give an opportunity for people to accept you. And by the way, you get to choose your own tribe. So if they're going to kick you out of that tribe, great. Saves you the trouble. Mm-hmm. And then last but not least, it's a snake. Cool. How are we going to replace this? Very simple. It's a snake. Yeah, it's the same words. It's the exact same words, but here's the magic of the brain. The magic of the brain is this. When we are under stress and anxiety and fear, our brain releases an incredibly complex cocktail of hormones, adrenaline and dopamine and some serotonin, all kinds of, and when we're excited, our brain releases the exact same hormonal cocktail. So our body is having an experience either of stress, fear, anxiety, or of excitement. And the only real difference is right here. How are you interpreting that signal? And the beautiful thing is you get to choose. Are you having an adventure or are you having an ordeal? Now look, this is where people stress out the most because most people try to control the roller coaster ride. You can't. You are strapped in. That is life taking you where it wants to go. But you do get to choose adventure or ordeal.
She got it. Wait a minute. I'm almost done.
You're good. You're good. So I want to give you one last practical piece, one last takeaway here, because somebody mentioned it right at the very beginning, public speaking. Oh boy, that for most people is an ordeal. Yeah. You guys are leaders. You're going to have to give some pretty massive public speeches in your day. So what happens? Well, you tell yourself this story. Oh God, that stresses me out. I'm just going to be nervous. I'm going to stumble. I'm going to fumble. I'm going to bumble my words. They're all going to reject me. Yeah, that's truth. Because your brain believes the story that you tell it. And if that's the story you're telling, that's what you're going to see. Incidentally, I've given a talk to a couple thousand people before. And most of the faces are like this. and I find the one who's like, and that's always where my focus goes. That's true for you guys too. You get one negative feedback. So instead, as you're going up on stage and you're like, woo, my heart is pounding. Oh God, I'm nervous. No, I'm not. I'm excited. Lie to yourself. You know it's a lie. I know it's a lie. We all know it's a lie, but it doesn't matter. Because you remember at the very beginning when I showed those A-B squares, those gray boxes, and I said, you don't even have to believe in a story in order to act from within it. Guess what? Good news. You don't even have to believe yourself that you're excited. But when you tell yourself that story, what you're doing is you're stretching your subconscious and your conscious, and you're creating a tension. And within that tension, you now have a choice. I'm going to go on stage and be excited about this adventure. Doesn't mean you're not going to feel those nerves. Doesn't mean you won't bumble and fumble. But when you do, and your focus isn't on that, you're going to do a heck of a lot better. So at the end of the day, you're not as good as you think you are. So be willing to be that non-expert. Exercise the weights. Ask yourself, why am I talking right now? Do I have to be right? Do I have to, or can I get it right? Find a common enemy to unite your team and continuously exercise that discomfort together. It'll drive you closer together. You're not as good as you think you are. You're also not as bad as you think you are either. So finding ways to smush those automatic negative thoughts and begin replacing them with practice enlightened thoughts is going to be really important. Use those awareness alarms to go through those ABCs. Seek continuous feedback, and of course, adopt yes and when you get that negative feedback and you're like, whoa, yes, and. You're not as good as you think you are, not as bad as you think you are, but you absolutely have to know who you fully are in order to be your most powerful leader. So this is where I want to leave you. I would love to tell you today that, of course, I am this fearless leader that has overcome all of these biases and instincts, and that's not true. Of course, that's not true. I'm on that roller coaster with you all. I'd also love to tell you that that little 8-year-old girl immediately came over her fears and has gone on to pursue this career exactly where I am today, and nothing could be further than the truth. I fell so deeply into that fear of failure that I went out and I was going to prove myself. I have to prove myself. So what did I do? I got a whole bunch of degrees that nobody has ever asked me to see. So disappointing. I did. I pursued this academic career, and I ended up in what I thought was the be all end all in this great tenured position. And I was miserable. And about that time, my sister was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And that's when we actually start thinking about our lives, isn't it? When we start thinking about those bucket lists. And I realized that if her diagnosis had been mine, I would be so disappointed in the life that I'd lived, because every single decision that I'd made out of fear. I'd made to please somebody else, what I believed they wanted to see out of me. So within the next month, I quit my job, sold my house, and divorced my husband. Now, I'm not saying that's the takeaway for you all. Don't go home like, I know how to solve this. I'm going to quit my job, sell my house, and divorce. It was the most painful and the most liberating 1.5 years of my life, because I stopped making decisions out of fear. What my sister taught me is that death is a huge tragedy, but it's not the biggest one. The biggest tragedy is a life lived in fear. That's not a life. That's just subconsciously taking the route that life takes you on. If I'm life, you don't get to control me, and I am going to shake you sometimes. So if this water bottle is getting shaken and there's water inside, what's spilling out? Not a trick question, I promise you. Water bottle, water inside, I'm shaking it. What's spilling out?
Water.
Water.
Water, thank you. And if I'm life and life is shaking you, which inevitably it is, what's spilling out of you?
Life.
My guess is, yeah, some life is spilling out. Some fear is spilling out unintentionally in the forms of biases and instincts and stories we don't even mean to be telling. So as life shakes you, I hope today we can use just a few of these tools to become slightly more fearless. And I put less in parentheses for good reason. I don't want you to be fearless. I don't want you jumping into the cage of an actual hungry tiger because you're like, Rebecca said fearless. Terrible decision. But if we can actively and consciously begin to sort our fears and say, yes, that is a life-threatening situation, and no, that is my fear of rejection or failure, of people who think different from me, we can toss those aside. Imagine who you will become as you let go of these ancient fears and step into your role as a fearless leader. That's where I leave you guys today. So thank you so much for your time and your attention and for playing all in. I am here for questions, comments, concerns, and feedback. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So as is our custom, we go around the room, and guests, please stay while we're doing this. And we talk about one thing we're gonna take away from Rebecca's, and she gave us some really easy ones this time that we can do. I'm just trying to find a piece of paper and we'll write this down. And you'll now hear Bandit because the Amazon guy is here now. So we'll get through that in a minute. So why don't we start with, we'll start with the bottom of my screen, Gary.
All right. I am going to think through some more practical purposes for defining the clear common external enemy and bringing that back to my leadership team.
Awesome. Thanks, Gary.
All right. Andy Hurd.
Sorry, there we go. I think I fall victim to a lot of what we talk about today, to be honest with you. Yeah, I've got to make some hiring decisions soon. And, Valentina and I talked yesterday. I'm like deathly afraid, not of rejecting, but of just getting it wrong, making that decision, kind of taking that leap. And so honestly, this is kind of a driving home that a little bit of that fear of making the wrong decision is leading me to not make a decision. So I've got to kind of, I'm gonna make it happen. And I don't know if it'll be in the next month, but it is. You hit the core of a lot of things I deal with. And honestly, on a personal front, I do a lot of this fear of failure. I play a lot of tennis, and it's always afraid to go out and lose. And what will they say? And what will my status be? And just go out and do it. It's a lot easier said than done, but I don't know. So a lot of that hit home. And then somewhere in your list was try to, go offer to buy someone a meal or talk to a stranger. I'm going to hit up a couple of those. I need to see the list though, but I'll commit to one once I can get a good look at the list.
Fantastic. Yeah, definitely use that fear setting sheet, Andy, for your cost of inaction. I think that'll be a powerful tool for you.
Barry, what about you?
Writing mine down in case I was at the bottom of the list. First of all, thank you. I a lot of things touched on what you said. I think one of the biggest items is in the position I'm in right now with my partners. It's not them, it's me. I've been put in this position the last year and a half where I'm a partner now. I had a small share and I have a larger share now to do some circumstances. And it's kind of this innate competitiveness I have where I have to feel worthy to meet up to their expectations. And it's not them doing it, it's me. So it's this innate kind of competitiveness, which I think it's survival. And it's the kind of proving you're worthy. And, maybe I don't have to be the expert. I can bring what I am. Obviously, they saw things in me that, they see are valuable or can be improved on. So I need to kind of take some of these exercises as well and address that. So, and the pet, I like that. I will have to tell my wife, she's kind of spot on because she's been telling me that for a while. She's a big proponent of, without even knowing it, pet. But I do have my little affirmation that she gave me that I have on my Post-it. But, I've used it where it's God loves us, things work out, and welcome the good.
Awesome. I
So that's
love
on my desk.
it. I love it. Great. I think one of the challenges in finding worthiness, it's shared by so many, and we become competitive with ourselves. And so just as you said, until I accept myself, until I recognize I'm showing up as enough, it's gonna be really hard for you to have others accept you there, because we believe that success, happiness follows success. And the reality is the exact opposite is true. So when we look at the science of success and happiness, we're happy first, and that drives success. So it's a really interesting correlation causation issue. But the more we dig into it, the more when we're satisfied with ourselves and we feel worthy, the more success we have. So just a thing to keep in mind.
All right, John, I was just writing down happiness chases success, because I think that that's something really kind of profound. So John,
I love the acuity thing. We were just looking for a 360 tool to use, so I'm going to go through it with the team and see if it can achieve our purpose, because I think it could. We need something. My view of the 360s was, I don't like the static nature of them. The tendency to, and everybody, there's a negative connotation with the concept that it implies you're in some sort of pip, right? It's when someone goes out, it's like, oh, why is this one person getting a 360 done on them? But I really liked the social aspect of that little tool, so I'm gonna look into it.
Cool. Great.
Awesome. Thanks, John. How about you, Anita?
I was thinking through thank you for all this information. You gave a lot of wonderful tools that I think I myself dibbled and dabbled in many of them. And I think one of the things I would like to work on is just being consistent. So going back to meditation, and, practicing yes ands, and using the tool of the ants versus pets, and just a lot of external failure versus core failure, I think is a great thing to be aware of, so I feel as there's a lot of opportunities to tap more into self-awareness. And so I'm very appreciative of that.
Awesome. Thanks, Anita. She actually hit on something that's really powerful here, I think, because the consistency piece is so hard for us. So when we think about physiology, and you guys probably are familiar with Good to Great, the flywheel concept, similar thing in your physiology. Actually, it's called the winner's effect from biology. So when you're doing well, when you're winning, when we see this in animals, when they win a competition, they're more likely to win the next one, and then the next one, and the next one. So how can you create that flywheel of success for yourself? The key in consistency is starting as small as possible. So if you want to lose 20 pounds, your aim should be losing 0.001 pound per day, or whatever the smallest thing that your scale can measure. Because when you do that, when you meditate for that 1 minute or for that 30 seconds, your physiology is like, amazing, we did it. And then tomorrow you're more likely to do it. And then you gain this sort of flywheel effect. So that piece of consistency, I think, is huge. Thanks for bringing that up, Anita. Start small.
How about you, Nikisha?
Yeah, I do want to echo Anita's sentiment, Rebecca. I definitely enjoyed your talk today. A lot of these things I have thought about and used in different ways. Recently, I've been asked to sit on several different boards. I think it's mainly because we live in the age of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm that person for a lot of organizations. And I think the thing that is interesting for me, or that just kind of was ringing in my mind as we were going through your presentation, is like showing up with my full humanity, my humanness, and then the other concept of weight. So it's interesting because I'm supposed to be the person in the room to offer this other perspective, but I think our natural instinct is that we want to fit in, which means let's keep things the way they have always been. And so I think I'm going to be a lot more intentional about showing up to get it right. So
awesome. Thank you.
RJ, how about you?
All right, thanks, Francine. Rebecca, thank you. Nice, very good morning spent and helping all of us think through things differently. So I think two takeaways for me, and actually one just enlightened. But the first is you never feel a tailwind. I felt that at times, and I kind of, it's important to remind myself as an old white guy, that's important. But I think there's also opportunities to leverage that. So how do we leverage that on behalf of our organizations, on behalf of the people that we serve? So kind of cluing into that. And then also, I love the flywheel that you just brought up, because people want to be associated with a winner, right? And whether that's your internal team, your constituents, customers, whoever that may be. So how do we leverage that for ourselves, and then how do we kind of highlight that for others? And to your point of telling the story, right? Telling that story so that it builds upon itself.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, RJ.
Awesome. Gwen, how about you?
Just looking at decision making from a different perspective, basically making decisions, looking at the pros and cons, how I can repair it if it's a bad decision, and then recalibrating using the breathing technique after I make decisions, just to calm me down and feel more secure about the decision. Either way it goes.
Awesome. That's awesome. Other Andy Wells.
Yeah, I think, all these things get you thinking. Really two, and I've been trying to start to think of other people's situations or thoughts or ideas. And I guess, the exercise of your I don't know exactly, I took some notes, but what our innate beliefs, like Barbie, like that thing, just getting away from that and thinking about, okay, what's different than I believe. I had to learn that early as a business person, in that I felt like it was hard to get away from people who didn't want to do things my way, because I have the right way. But then you find out you have a lot of people who can do things the right way, and it works. So that was one. And then two is defining a common enemy, I think, so we can kind of have that be something we can talk about. And how does our actions and thoughts and decisions work toward that goal?
Huge. Thanks.
Hey, Tara, how about you?
Hey, thanks for a wonderful presentation. I really enjoyed it. I'm going to be using pets all the time. Gotta change out those negs for posies. It's going to make a big difference.
Love it. Love it.
Pat?
Yeah. So this year started with meditation. So just hearing this again, reaffirming that, focusing on that. So when we're in those stressful situations, we're not apt to compromise our own values and beliefs, right? That we're going to be able to take the time to make the right decision by laying the foundation first for myself to base that off of.
Awesome.
Awesome. And for myself, I would say a couple things. I love the wait. I went from a job where I needed to know the answers, or I thought I needed to know the answers, to now waiting for the answers, which will really be a pain in the ass to all of the rest of you, because now I'm going to be like, I don't know, what do you think? Right? So it's going to be a lot more difficult for all of you, but that's what really my job is now. So that's a good thing. I also love the kind of tiny habits, right? I'm trying to do that with my own kind of health goals for this year. And instead of doing the big, take a big chunk, and if I was good enough, I would be able to, lose 20 pounds in 3 weeks, right? It is all about the kind of, let's take a tiny step and win, and a tiny step and win. And that is something that I'm taking to heart this year, and hoping, right, will, kind of connect with my brain and make me more successful than I have before. So I think both of those are amazing. I love I think your message of self-awareness is one of the things that we do here in Vistage. I think only by having kind of a group like this can you be reflected back to yourself and saying, what do you really truly believe? And that's something I want to encourage all of our members to do today while we're processing issues, while we talk about any kind of goals, like what are we reflecting back and what are we limiting ourselves for? Because sometimes you are unable to see it yourself until somebody reflects it back to you. And that is because of biology. It's not anything other than that. And I think that that's what the power of this kind of group is. So Rebecca, thank you so much for kind of bringing that all home. I look forward to hearing this talk twice more this week. So I should be an expert by the time next week rolls around, and all of you will probably get the benefit of that as well. So I really do appreciate it. We're right here on time. Any other questions? I want to give just a minute, take a second, pause, think about if there's any other questions that you want to ask. Now that you couldn't contact Rebecca, our new website gives you her her email address direct there and her phone number. So I'm sure she's, as most Vistage speakers are available, she can't give you 8 hours of feedback, but she'd be happy to give you 15-20 minutes of time. And but think about it now while we've got her. Is there anything else, a specific situation that you're thinking of for maybe a loved one, a kid? I think about a lot of this for my teenagers and my 20-year-old to kind of, ooh, this is a good way to kind of be looking at what they're experiencing. Anybody else have any other thoughts, questions?
You mentioned teenagers. Our only child is heading off to college in August, so we're starting to deal with the empty nester syndrome and that separation and him growing and accepting all that. So I'm trying to process all of that as well. We have 2 alpha males in the house now, and I kind of have to accept that. So
it's a good time to practice those pets, Barry. Our youngest went to college last year, and it's a huge, if you focus on the emptiness, that's what you'll see. And if you focus on all these incredible, amazing freedoms that you're going to have without having another alpha in the house, it's amazing.
I know.
Right?
I know.
So keep choosing that adventure, that new adventure that's coming for you.
It's an adventure, not an ordeal.
That's right. That's right.
Anybody else? Awesome. Well, our guests, thank you so much. You make our conversations more lively and more interesting. So thank you so much for joining us. I encourage all of you always, especially when we're on Zoom, and I know we kind of had this kind of difference, but absolutely invite guests, because it certainly makes our discussions more lively. So thank you very much. And why don't I say for our group, why don't we take 45 minutes and then we'll come back. So why don't we say at 12:45, we'll come back from lunch and then start our executive session from there. If you want to sign off, sign back on.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Whatever you need.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Rebecca.
It's been a privilege. Be well.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you,
I'll
Rebecca.
send you an email, actually probably now, with the address.
Perfect. All right. See you guys.
Thanks,
Take care.
guys.